Tell me when you're good.
Got it. Great.
Well, it's my honor. I mean, anything for John, for real. I first knew of John when he was a prisoner of war before I got to the Senate. And then I remember vividly watching television, John getting off the plane and saluting with a bad arm and thinking to myself, what an incredible ordeal these men went through. Then I ended up in the United States Senate in 1973, and John later came shortly thereafter as what they call the Navy liaison. There's a military office in the basement of the Russell building. And so when you travel abroad, you have a military escort with you just to make sure everything logistically is moving, whomever travels. But I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, so I was doing a lot of traveling. And every time I traveled, I tried to make sure I had John, and I think John did the same thing. And we traveled all over the world together, and we became friends. I got to know his family. They came up to visit us up here for a picnic at our house. I just, John hasn't changed in terms of his decency, his honesty, his friendship, the thing I like about John never walks by a man or a woman, whether it's a shoe shine guy at an airport or whether it's a CEO of a company. He treats them all the same exact way. That's how I was raised. That's what connected me with John. Oh, it was fun. It was always fun. I mean, here, I was by far and away the youngest member of the Foreign Relations Committee, with one exception. The next one was, I think, 63 years old. I was 32 years old or 33. And John and I just hit it off. And John became very good friends with my wife, Jill, because in those days, senators were encouraged to have their spouses travel to interact with one another and also interact when we were in the country we were visiting. And so John and Jill became really good friends, and and they both have the same sense of humor. They both are the kind of folks who would put a bucket of water on the door in your college dorm and watch it fall on your head, kind of thing. They both have that sense of humor, and they just became great friends. And we traveled as a kind of a threesome, and it was just great fun. Like hell, he carried my bags, but no. Technically, what happens is that whoever the liaison is responsible for all the logistics. So all the baggage or material that's on the plane going to whatever event is, that person's responsible. But I don't remember, although I may have carried a couple of John's bags, helping him get the rest of the stuff out. But we've just been great friends. What John and I would talk about when we traveled is I learned a lot from John about the military, for real. And John and I would talk substance about whether I was going to meet Carmen Lease or I was going to China, with Deng Xiaoping, wherever it was. John and I would talk about the substance of it. And when John showed an interest in maybe running, I strongly encouraged John to run. I had no doubt in my mind that John McCain would be running for president someday. I don't think he thought it that way, but I had no doubt in my mind. So when he went to the Congress, he stood out in the House. He was in the House first, as you know. And when he came to the Senate, he was already a well-known commodity. He was already respected. A guy like me coming to the Senate at age 30, I didn't know anybody. I'm the first senator I ever knew. But John knew a lot of people, and John was embraced, and John was embraced by and embraced both sides of the aisle. I mean, I don't think John missed a beat coming over to the Senate. I don't think there wasn't anything like, well, he's junior. Nobody ever, that I can recall, thought in those terms with John. I was trying to explain John to someone after the medal ceremony up in Philadelphia. And I said, if you were going to draw a picture of what constituted a patriot, John is a patriot. John is that sounds corny, but everything with John is about the country. everything with John. And John understands that politics is all personal. You have to know the person. You have to, and even when you disagree with someone vehemently, if you know they have a son or daughter who has a drug problem, or their wife has breast cancer, or they have financial troubles, or they had difficulty in school, it's hard when you get to know them. It's hard to dislike them. And so instead of today, it's all about attacking motive. Yeah, the reason you're this is you're not a good Christian. The reason you're that, you're in the pocket of. That's not John. It's all about differences of view and opinion. And so when John came over, there were a lot of things we worked on together. I was trying to think of the things, knowing this interview was coming up, but where we disagreed. We disagreed on some foreign policy things. We disagreed on Afghanistan, and mostly of late, I mean the last 10 years. But, I strongly supported John's effort for financing of elections. Hell, I introduced a proposal for public financing of elections. John strongly supported my efforts on violence against women and dealing with abuse. There were so many things we worked on together. So John is a conservative, but, John's a traditional Republican, the Republican Party that came up from Eisenhower. That's John. And there's nothing narrow about John. John is not one of these guys that is unwilling to help people in need. John supports, look what John and I worked together on immigration. John worked on health care. So John is not an ideologue. John is a mainstream conservative Republican that can to stay out of people's lives as much as you can. But John carries that across the board. There's a lot of people who say the government should stay out of your life if you're in trouble, but the government should enter your bedroom and tell you what your conduct can be. So it's John's consistent. I've not gone back and flyspecked his record, but John has been consistent. For example, it didn't surprise me a little bit that John voted against the Republican proposal on health care. Well, John said, look, the way this place is supposed to work where you actually have hearings. You air this. The public has a right to know what the debate is about. The public has a right to know what the issues are and what the elements of the issues are. And so that's what he calls regular order. I kid him. He's become too much of a Senate guy. He talks like a Senate guy now. Regular order. But all regular order means is you introduce a bill, you have hearings, you let the public see what's going on, you show the press, you have witnesses, and you have amendments, and you make up your mind. That's how democracy is supposed to work. So it didn't surprise me at all when John walked in. Well, look, I never tried to convince John. I laid out, he asked me what I thought. I laid out what I thought the stakes were. And the one thing John has that a lot of folks, I shouldn't say a lot, not as many folks have. John has a genuine sense of empathy. When you've suffered, physically, mentally, when you've had really hard times, it's not hard to have empathy for other people. Bob Dole, very conservative Republican, author of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because he knows. He knows. John knows. And what John and I, anyway, that's personal what we talked about, but I was calling John, as I always do. The conversation was about his physical condition because my son had the exact same diagnosis as John, and had the same kind of sense of duty and honor and determination John does. And but the measure of the man is how he responds under significant adversity. And look at John. Look at him. He's a good friend. And he's giving people hope. Number one, first and foremost, again, John the Patriot. It's in the interest of the United States of America, for our national security, that there be normalization relations with a country that physically, brutally beat him, abused him, nearly killed him. And this is a guy who walks in, talk about a patriot, and says, no, here's my hand, time to shake hands. Why? Because it's in the interest of the United States of America. John always puts the country before himself, all the time. So it was also morally profound what he did. And it set such an incredible example, and John Kerry as well. But the idea that these two men, both decorated, thank God John Kerry wasn't wounded beaten like John was. But, these guys, they acted in the interest of the United States of America. They put their country before themselves. That's probably the best description I could give of John in his whole life. When I got to the Senate, when John got there to the House, and I got there way before John, I got there in '72, you had people who had violent disagreement almost. You still had the old segregationists there, James Lewison from Mississippi, and Holman Talmadge from Georgia, and all those good old boys. And yet the political system worked because they weren't constantly personal invective and personal attacks constantly. And a lot of that has changed today. It's changed in a way that is not, it's not at all healthy. And so one of the things that with John, John and I'll give you an example. Around the mid-'90s, John and I used to sit on the floor together when there was a debate. I'd go over his side of the aisle. It'd be, half the time the Senate chamber's empty. I mean, there's only 4 or 5 people in it until we get to vote. And so when we have something we were both working on, whether we were for or against each other, I'd go over and sit next to John at his desk, and he'd come over and sit next to me. And it was in the late 90s, Carter was president, and coincidentally, on the same day, we have what we call caucuses, where the Democrats eat together and Republicans eat together and they talk about policy. I walked into my caucus, and some serious senators said, "Why are you sitting with McCain?" I said, "He's my friend." "Well, it doesn't look good. McCain got the same thing from his caucus. Why are you and Biden on the floor together? Sitting there chatting, talking, hanging out." I mean, my God. It began to change, and I wish I could remember the year, but it was in probably 96, 97, 98, in that range. And it was like, man, what's going on here, man? By the way, we didn't listen to them, but think about that. And before, that was standard procedure. A lot of men and women in the Senate did that. We were told, each of us by our respective parties, it didn't look good. They're not my enemy. They ran for the same reason I did, because they really believe they can make the country better. We disagree how. This is not the enemy. But that's how it's being portrayed these days. And it's dangerous. It's eating away at the moral fabric of society. John and I this year jointly, and 3 big organizations that give the Bipartisanship of a Year award. John and I, for 2 of them, got 2 of them together. And we looked at each other like, isn't this what we're supposed to do? I really mean it. It was almost embarrassing to get an award for being bipartisan. And you know why it's going to change? Because of you. I'm not being facetious. Because of the millennial generation. They've had it to here. And they're finally realizing how dangerous this is to continue it. They really are. And I think the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats know better. They got to start to stand up and, as John would say, get back to regular order. First of all, I've never run a campaign where I've done that to anybody. But everybody was kind of, some of the people, not Barack, not the president, but some of the people were a little concerned, well, he's really tight with McCain. I mean, is he going to really be able to go in there and, duke it out? And I just want to make it real clear that if anybody came to me with something like the attack that he got in South Carolina in the campaign with George W. Bush 8 years earlier, I said, I'm not in, man. I'm not in. Because when he got attacked in that campaign, I picked up the phone and called him. I said, John, where do you want me? Where do you want me? I will testify to your character before anyone in the country. You just tell me, pal. And he started laughing. He said, well, you'd hurt me more than you'd help, Joe, by testifying. But for real, I would never do that. And I know Barack knew I wouldn't do that anyway, but I wanted some of the sharpshooters and, all these campaigns, every campaign, both sides have these sharpshooters, they're out there. And I'll make it clear, not me. Matter of fact, there may even have said, and if there is, I'm not only not going to do it, I'll say something. Just not, you can't do that to me. Again, it goes back to disagreeing. We can disagree. God and John and I disagree in Afghanistan. We disagree on some foreign policy things, and John can holler, man, as you know. but this man has an incredible character. It was a much more competitive campaign till it was clear the market fell. I mean, John was carrying an 800-pound rock up a hill. I mean, on his watch as a candidate in September, Lehman went under and everything began to nosedive. And I just think, talk about good year, bad year. It's a bad year. I think, I've not seen a candidate more talented than Barack Obama. I think Barack would have won anyway. But I just, John really drew a bad hand, man. It's easy to second guess at the time. Remember, everyone forgets how popular she was at the time. I mean, she was like a lightning bolt, and she was generating enormous enthusiasm among Republicans, some who thought John was a little too liberal or too progressive, or whatever phrase they want to use. And so I could see how it could come about and happen. I don't think it was the best judgment on John's part, but I don't think he knew. I don't know what he knew or didn't know, but I was a little surprised. And by the way, in the Keating Five, because I had been through an accusation that turned out not to be true 5 years earlier, that I lifted somebody's speech and I never quoted him and all this stuff. It was horrible for me because I'd never had my honored questioned before. And so John would come over to my office in the Keating Five and we'd sit in the car and talk. And I said, John, look, you're a hero, man. You've just gotta, everybody's gonna understand and just tough it out here, tough it out. But it killed John because it was attacking his honor, it was attacking his integrity. And just like me, never before or since in mine had ever been attacked, which was back in '87 with me. John's hadn't been either. I would think that was the roughest time of John's career. And it was, turned out, he was fine. But it was just, I really felt badly for him having to go through it, watching the pain of having to deal with that. He came out more than all right. He came out more than all right. But when you're in the middle of it, it looks awful dark. That's what I kept, anyway. That should be, not a joke. That speech should be required reading for every government class in high school and every political science course on American politics. John's concession speech, literally, not figuratively, should be required reading in every single government course taught in high school and every political science course relating to the American political system. Because John did what every American should be doing, but it's so hard when you lose. John wasn't begrudgingly congratulating Barack Obama. He not only congratulated, he went further. He said, and this is historic, a black man is now president of the United States of America. We have to help him succeed. This is what we're going to do. I don't have a single regret in this campaign. And then classic John, he said, and our loss, my supporters, you couldn't have done anything more for me. Any fault in the loss lies with me. That's John. I mean, it was gracious. It was futuristic. It was about the country. He was saying, come on now, come on. Everybody get in here, man. Help this man. I'm going to help him. I'm here. I'm here. I mean, my Lord. I mean, but if we had another 50 John McCains. John used to kid me when my beau was elected as a young man to as Attorney General and had enormous opportunities. And I remember John talking about, like his other son, how proud he was that Beau volunteered to go to Iraq for a year and gave up his seat as Attorney General for a year to do it. And his son was a combat guy. And I mean, it's just, my mom used to have an expression. She said, be careful what you say, they're listening. So, well, I was getting off a plane. I came in and my secretary immediately said, did you hear about Senator McCain? I immediately called. I put a call into his daughter. I put a call into my friend and John's, Lindsey Graham, to see what he knew. And then I ended up being able to speak to John. And I spoke to a senior staffer doing healthcare stuff that was advising John. And then I sat down with I call my son's doctors, two of whom are dealing with John. And so I've kept touch with John and on a regular basis and giving him, I'm not a doctor, but when you go through this, I turned up every possible stone I could to see what there was as a possibility. And, but like Beau, my son, John's never given up. John is punching away. John is, and there's hope. There's hope. It's a tough, ugly disease. But, John's, it'd be so trite to say, doing it like a man, the old expression, but John is just, and John's like my son Beau. Beau kept saying to me, Dad, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. Are you going to be okay, Dad? Promise me, Dad. John's telling people, I'm going to be okay, no matter what happens. But take care. I want you to stay engaged. Be okay. Be okay. I mean, it's always about the other guy with John. It was always about the other guy with my son. And it's the exact same precise diagnosis. Teddy was Beau's guide. I mean, these are incredible men. I mean, I know that sounds so trite, but how many people you know who are handed a judgment that at best is really tough to overcome, and get up every single day, put one foot in front of the other, do their job. Ask John how he is. I'm fine. Good. Everything good. Luckiest man in the world. Luckiest man in the world. I've had a great life, Joe. I've had a great life. My son, Beau, talking to my son, Hunt. You've been my backbone my whole life. You're there for me all the time, Hunt. I mean, instead of, anyway. John looks at people, in my view, like my son did, and sees the pain they feel in their eyes for him. And he tries to make it go away. When a lot of other people be curled up in a fetal position or be damning their circumstance. Not John, not Bo, not Teddy. It's classic John. And we haven't had a circumstance, and it was so badly needed at the moment he gave it, not about the issue per se, but at the state of our politics, how it's become so mean and petty and debilitating, and it's eating away at the moral fabric of the society. And what holds the whole system up are the basic customs of decency, and there's, as David Brooks said, there's this thin moral fabric that runs through society. It matters how you talk about the other person. It matters whether or not there's common purpose. We're one of the most heterogeneous democracies in the world. There has to be these unspoken rules. And what you read through what John has been saying, he said, it's time. It's time. Let's remember who we are as Americans. What makes us different? We're not organized by tribe or religion. We're organized by ideals, as David Brooks said. That's the organizing principle for America. But we have some now on the alt-right and others who would rather us organized by tribe, divide us. John's speech up at the Constitution Center was brilliant. No, I really mean it. It's going to be one of those speeches people are going to be reading for the next 35, 40 years. Because John talked about how can we have this Machiavellian, this Hobbesian view of the world. You win, I lose. I win, you lose. That's it. That's never been American foreign policy. We have been a party and a country where it's not just the exercise of our power that gets people to follow us. It's the power of our example, not the example of the power. And John gets that. And it's also very much in our interest. We should be encouraging, leaning in, pushing democratic opportunities, standing up for human rights. These are the things that are not only the right, morally right thing to do, but they're the thing that, in fact, makes America more secure. But these guys are out there trying to shred that liberal world order that was set up after World War II that prevents the abuse of power or diminishes the prospects of it. And John, talking at this, whatever his phrase was, this half-baked nationalism, it's a brilliant, substantively brilliant speech. And the one thing about John that gets underestimated is how smart he is. Just pure gray matter. How smart he is. He not only does the right thing, he's able to articulate. Some of John's speeches are real masterpieces. And they almost always come at times of crisis. And they're clarifying. John is clarifying what the issues are here. And they go well beyond whether you're for or against a particular bill. They go to who are we as Americans? Are we going to remain that shining city on the hill? Are we going to devolve into this Machiavellian notion of, anyway, John's, you ought to read that. You probably have. Read that speech. It's brilliant. I think it's when you have real deep disagreements. And by the way, we talk about our disagreements, but I don't want to hurt his reputation, but we agreed more on basic social policy and a lot of foreign policy than, like, for example, when I went over and laid out the administration's foreign policy in Munich in the first year, John was highly complimentary of the speech. But I think Afghanistan is a big mistake for a lot of reasons I won't bore you with. John thinks we should double down there, and I'm oversimplifying it. But no matter what our disagreements, I've always known, I mean, for real, if I picked up the phone in the middle of the night and said, John, I need your help. I'm out at 7th and Tatnall in St. Louis, Missouri. I can't tell you why. Can you come? I know he would get in a plane and come. And I would for him. I've always known that about John, even when John has appropriately commented on some gaffe I've made or some mistake I've made or in a debate or a political issue. I just have always known, always known. And he knows that about me. Yeah, I've seen, not lately, but I've seen John lose his temper. And every once in a while, he'll kid you. You ask him. I get a call from Bob Dole saying, can you come over and talk to John? Because he'd get in a real debate, even with his own guys or with somebody else. And I'd come in and, I'd go. I remember when he was running, he said, I wished him luck. And he said, yeah, he said, I say a prayer every day, don't lose my temper. Because I had the same kind of temper, so we understand each other. But sure, I've seen him lose temper, but I've never seen him, even when he's lost it and said something he wished he hadn't said, not go and say, hey, I'm sorry. I mean, John knew that the first bill I introduced as a kid in the Senate was that public financing of elections. He wasn't calling for public finance. He was talking for much more disclosure, limitations, et cetera. So John knew how strongly I felt about what he and Russ were doing. I would even try to go further, but the truth was this was it would have been significant benefit to the country had it occurred. And so we talked about it. I constantly encouraged him. I'd go on the floor and, speak for him and, and go and listen and no, John knew how strongly I felt about McCain-Feingold. The Bush administration, their legal counsel's judgment about what constituted appropriate treatment of a prisoner of war drove John over the edge. And most of us felt very strongly, it said, it was a recruiting tool for ISIS or for then Al-Qaeda that we continued this, having these prisons. But John, no one could speak with greater authority than John. He was on the other end of that. And he knows how barbaric it is. He also knows it doesn't produce much. It doesn't produce much. And the idea that we have not been willing to come forward and say, look, the great thing about America has been, when we've made a mistake, we basically said, not always immediately, we're wrong. We're changing. This is who we are. And so John feels extremely strong because it goes to the essence of what it is to be an American. What we Americans believe about the sanctity of people who are alive, who are in trouble. The idea there's certain behavior, no matter what the other team does, is totally inappropriate. Wrong. But the thing John understands better than anyone else, it's not only wrong, it also is damaging to our national security. Like I said, we have led the world and put together the most incredible alliances in the history of the world. That's not hyperbole, in the history of the world, because the world's repaired to who we are. We are a product of our values. And when we, in the face of a crisis, yield like most every other country does to expediency, then we lose our standing. We lose our SWAT. We lose our ability to move and cajole and pace things. And anyway, John is, and only John could pull that off. I mean, I talk about it. I've talked about it at length when I was in the Senate, and when the first thing we did as vice president and president was say torture is no longer appropriate. We're not going to allow that to happen. We've been trying from the very beginning to close down Guantanamo. But John's voice is it's almost like the voice of God in this one. What we can do is, first of all, understand that you cannot have a democracy function when the leaders of the country speak in such crass and demeaning ways about their enemies, quote unquote, from their perspective, their opponents, but also how they soil the coin of the realm, just basic decency. It's almost as simple as this moral fabric is so thin that it matters. That, for example, to be able to have common purpose, to actually, as a society, to be able to get together and have common purpose and what we want to get done, be able to actually, in a society, acknowledge the dignity of all people. Did you ever think, and you're a young man, did you ever think, I never thought I'd live to see the day when a group of people coming literally out of the fields and from under rocks carrying swastikas, chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that happened in the 30s. The same bile. The same words. And then these white supremacists, for God's sake. And then when people come to protest them and confront them, there's a moral equivalence? My God, what are we doing? That's not America. America does not tolerate hate. And, like my mom said, children are listening. Our children are listening. The example being set is devastating. Devastating. And your generation is the most progressive in the broad sense. It is the most open-minded. It is the most accepting of differences of people's race and religion of any generation in American history. That's why I am confident America's best days are. I am absolutely confident this bile will not prevent this phony populism and this crazy nationalism. There's two strains that I never thought I'd see rise up in America. They've risen up in the 18th and 19th and 20th century in Europe, and they brought down democracies. There's no guarantee for democracy. It rests on this undercarriage of decency, of treating one another with some decency, and it cannot stand. But your generation is so far ahead on this. The only thing I have worried about till now is that you got to wake up and go out and fight. You got to wake up and say, no, not here in my America. For real, not here. Not here. I don't care what your politics, not here. And that's, and John's sort of the clarion call to that. That's it in its essence. It's about who we are as Americans. Look, you can't possibly define for me who an American is based on race, religion, ethnicity, economic background. America's an idea. And the most educated to the least educated American, when you ask them, well, do you have a right to speak that way? Or say, do you have a right to free speech? And they'll say, yeah. I say, why? The Constitution. The thing that binds us together, and even though they don't articulate it in detail, is this notion. That's what America is. It's the elements. We hold these truths self-evident. That all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Americans believe that. They translate it 50 different ways and don't quote the Constitution. You were raised, I expect, the same way I was. You can be anything. You can be anything you want to be in America. Or, ordinary people can do and have done extraordinary things. Extraordinary things, given half a chance. But it's like today, we're walking around with our head down. I mean, we're better positioned than any country in the world to own the 21st century. Not just because they're the most powerful military in the history of mankind. We also have the most productive workforce. We have the most significant venture capitalists in the world. They're agile. We have the greatest research universities in the world, we have more great research universities in America than all the rest of the world combined. Not hyperbole, literally, because of Dwight Eisenhower. Every innovative idea in the last 25 years, 99% have come out of the United States of America. I mean, and we walk around now like, we're in trouble. We have to, it's us against them. It's, non-inclusive. I mean, your generation is going to make us stand up. We've got to stand up and lead again. I mean, we've got to be vocal again. That's why John's such a rallying cry for Democrats and Republicans. Because the American public knows better. They've been so turned off by the nature of our politics for the last 10 years, it's not brand new, that now they're realizing, wait a minute, man, I can't stand the sidelines. I gotta make my case known. And I think they're rallying. I mean, I'm showing up to make speeches in places. I'm going around the country where ordinarily there'd be 300-400 people. There are 3,000 people. I mean, time and time again. I mean, it's like, but people are worried with good reason. So now, take it back now. We're gonna do this. And I'm absolutely confident, but the confidence is not because I think there are, we've always had some version of the alt-right in America and extreme left. It's always been there, but it's that big. It's not the rest of the American people. And we just have to have enough leadership now to fight back. And it's not going to be hard. It's like pushing on an open door, in my view, because of your generation. John is the one thing people don't, I guess they do talk about it. John's a lot of fun. He's mischievous. Back in the days when he was Navy liaison, I remember I had to go see, I think it was Carmen Lease in Greece, the prime minister. And there was a dinner I had to go to, and Jill didn't want to go to the dinner. Next thing I hear about, he and Jill are on top of a cement table down at a wharf, dancing the Zorba the Greek, whatever. I mean, John is just constantly engaging, and he, it's easy to like John. And when you like somebody, you're more inclined to listen too. And this guy's got it all. But the thing about John is I've known no man I've worked with more valor, a greater sense of duty, and absolute courage. I said this before, but I really mean it. My mom used to say to me all the time as a kid, remember, Joey, you're defined by your courage and you're redeemed by your loyalty. That was my mother's credo. That's John McCain.